The greatest deception of the modern age is not a political conspiracy or a hidden treasure map. It is the fundamental structure of the global financial system itself. We are conditioned to see our economy as a stable, predictable machine, governed by the laws of supply and demand, saving and investment. But peer beneath the surface, behind the polished glass of the central bank towers, and you encounter a chilling reality. The operating system of global commerce functions on a principle of structural dependence that fundamentally rhymes with the logic of a fraudulent scheme. The system requires not real, sustainable growth based on productivity, but a perpetually increasing volume of new participants, new loans, new deficits, new generations, whose fresh contributions are necessary not to generate profit, but simply to honor the outstanding claims of the layers above. Every dollar you deposit, every national budget passed, every pension fund built, relies on an engine that must accelerate forever. The question is not one of legal definition, but of fiscal physics. Can a system founded on the perpetual motion machine of debt claims continue to defy the gravity of mathematics in a world of finite resources and slowing demographics? The illusion of Genesis, money born of debt. To grasp this architecture, we must first confront the creation myth of modern money. Most people assume that money begins with the government printing paper or minting coins. That is the smallest, most superficial part of the story. In reality, the vast majority of currency in circulation is not printed at all. It is lent into existence. This is the central feature of our fractional reserve banking system, an engine that allows debt to be the active ingredient of the money supply. When a commercial bank issues a loan, a mortgage, a business line of credit, a student loan, it does not transfer existing funds from a vault. It creates a corresponding deposit in the borrower's account, often holding only a small fraction of that sum, or sometimes none at all, depending on the current reserve requirements, as security. This act of lending is, quite literally, the genesis of currency. The money you borrow today instantly becomes the capital that other people deposit, invest, or spend tomorrow. This mechanism is the core of the magical multiplier. $1,000 deposited can swiftly become several $1,000s of claims stacked on top of each other, all woven out of the invisible thread of debt. This is not inherently evil, but it carries a terrifying condition. For the money supply to exist and grow, the debt must continuously increase. If the system were to suddenly stop lending, if the base of debt were to freeze, the entire stack of claims, deposits, and investments above it would instantly become brittle. In this environment, a system-wide collapse is not triggered by a lack of profit, but by a sudden lack of new participants willing to take on more debt and replenish the claims. This is the true structural echo of the fraudulent scheme. The system is paid not with productivity, but with future promises. The current layer of claims is upheld by the promise that a new, wider layer of claims, new debt, will be created tomorrow. The hourglass of obligation, vertical wealth flow. Once money is born of debt, the system ensures that this debt-infused currency flows in a specific, upward direction, a structural transfer of value that disproportionately benefits the top layers of the financial and political structure. We can observe this mechanism working through two primary channels of vertical obligation, national solvency and demographic promises. 1. The intergenerational IOU national debt. Consider the national debt of major global powers, including the United States, which now stands in the tens of trillions. When a government runs a deficit, it doesn't just defer a cost. It issues a transfer of burden. The money used today to fund current operations, social programs, or military spending is acquired by selling treasury bonds and other debt instruments. These instruments are essentially IOUs drawn on the future. Who pays that IOU? Not the politicians who approve the spending, but the future generations who must pay the principal and interest through their labor, taxation, and eroded currency value. Current needs are met by leveraging the unearned wealth and economic potential of the unborn. This is a fiscal construct that can only be maintained as long as the base of new generations, the new recruits, is willing and able to shoulder the ever-growing interest payments and absorb the debt without revolting against the political contract. The system is structurally dependent on the continuous, implicit agreement of the next generation to finance the consumption of the last. It is a financial chain letter passed down through time. 2. The aging conveyor belt, the demographic trap. The most visceral example of the pyramid structure operating in plain sight is the modern pay-as-you-go entitlement system, Social Security, pensions, and certain healthcare systems. These systems were never designed as true savings accounts where your money is invested and grows. They were designed as a demographic conveyor belt. The money you contribute to Social Security today does not sit in a vault waiting for you. It is immediately paid out to the retirees who retired yesterday. The system works flawlessly only under one condition: that the base of the pyramid, the ratio of young, working, contributing citizens, is always significantly wider than the top layer of retirees drawing benefits. However, in nearly every major developed economy, from Japan to Europe and increasingly the US, birth rates are falling and life expectancy is rising. The base is shrinking while the top expands. The conveyor belt is slowing down, yet the obligations it carries are accelerating. The only way governments can stop the system from grinding to a halt is to A. Reduce the payout, default on the promise. B. Increase the contribution, tax the base harder, or C. Print more money, inflate the entire structure. All these solutions impose a brutal cost on the younger, productive base, demonstrating that the structural health of the entire retirement architecture is reliant on the continuous and robust recruitment of new, young taxpayers. Without this influx, the promise breaks, confirming the underlying pyramid design. The furnace of control, fueling the illusion. If the system is a pyramid of claims, what keeps it from collapsing? The answer lies in the strategic deployment of two powerful tools wielded by the central authorities: infinite credit and stealth erosion. 1. The central bank as the infinite investor. When the debt pyramid begins to wobble, as it did catastrophically in 2008 and again in 2020, the ultimate safety net appears: the central bank, operating as the infinite investor and recruiter of last resort. In a traditional Ponzi scheme, the moment new cash stops flowing, the scheme dies. In the modern economy, the central bank simply creates the new cash flow. Through mechanisms like quantitative easing, QE, the central bank purchases assets, primarily government bonds, from financial institutions, injecting trillions of new dollars into the system. This maneuver is effectively the creation of the next layer of claims from thin air, ensuring that the existing debts can be serviced and the falling dominoes are arrested. This action is not market behavior. It is a structural intervention that replaces missing private demand for debt with state-created demand for debt. The bank does not fix the problem. It simply expands the base of the pyramid with freshly minted currency, postponing the reckoning and reaffirming the system's reliance on continuous, non-productive expansion. 2. Inflation, the silent erosion. This constant reliance on expanding the money supply leads directly to the most insidious tool of system preservation: inflation. Inflation is not an accident or a simple price fluctuation. It is the system's payment mechanism. Think of inflation as a silent erosion or a stealth tax. When the money supply expands faster than the production of real goods and services, the purchasing power of every existing unit of currency declines. This process achieves two critical goals for the pyramid masters: debt management Inflation reduces the real value of the immense national debt. $1 trillion owed today is much less burdensome if that $1 trillion represents half the purchasing power it did a decade ago. It is a systematic way for the government to partially default on its liabilities without ever technically missing a payment. Wealth transfer, as established by the Cantillon effect, the newly created money flows to the asset-holding classes first, while the inflationary effects, higher prices for rent, food, and fuel, are borne primarily by the wage-earning saving classes later. The base of the pyramid bears the inflationary sacrifice necessary to keep the structural debt manageable at the top. Inflation, therefore, is the structural cost of survival for the debt-fueled pyramid. It is the inescapable tax levied upon the citizenry to keep the perpetual motion machine of claims and obligations churning forward. The bailing ship paradox and the path to sovereignty. History is littered with the wrecks of empires that built their wealth on this architecture of escalating debt and dependence. The speculative bubbles of the 1920s, the Japanese asset boom of the 1980s, the Asian financial crisis, and the 2008 global collapse were not deviations from the norm. They were predictable moments when the flow of new debt temporarily faltered and the illusion of perpetual growth cracked. In every instance, the response was the same bailing ship paradox. The problem was never solved by addressing the underlying structural reliance on debt. Instead, the central authorities doubled down, injecting an even larger volume of newly created currency into the system, temporarily widening the base of the pyramid at the cost of pushing the eventual reckoning further into the future and making the eventual crash exponentially larger. The unsettling truth is that you and I are standing at the bottom of a financial structure built on claims upon the future. This structure may not be illegal, but its mathematics are unforgiving and its incentives are clear. It is designed to protect itself, not to enrich the diligent saver. Survival under this architecture requires a fundamental shift in perspective. 1. Acknowledge the design, stop viewing inflation and debt crises as policy failures. Recognize them as structural features, the necessary friction and costs required to sustain the perpetual motion machine. 2. Flee the claims. Real wealth under this system is not held in financial assets or savings accounts denominated in the currency that can be printed endlessly. It is held in sovereign assets, tangible, productive resources, specialized skills, and investments that survive outside the direct control of the central bank's printing press. 3. Prioritize flow over stock in a system built on debt and inflation. Holding static piles of currency is a guaranteed path to poverty. Financial freedom lies not in the static stock of money you hold, but in the dynamic flow of value you control. The global economy is not legally a pyramid scheme, but its reliance on ever-increasing debt and demographic expansion makes it structurally analogous to one. Understanding this inherent contradiction is the only way to avoid being crushed when the next inevitable collapse in the flow of new debt causes the towering architecture of claims to finally shudder and sway.